Welcome to Soul Sister Stories, where we dive into profound journeys of spiritual awakening with inspiring women. I'm Rika Markel, your host on this journey. My passion is to empower you to tune into your soul's whispers by presenting you the stories of soul sisters who have dared to dream and live extraordinary lives while helping others doing the same. I am extremely excited for my guest because her name is Becca Speart. Becca, welcome to my show. I really am excited for this conversation. I would love to hear more about your story. How did you become like a spiritual seeker? And what does that even mean to you?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I don't label myself much these days, but I'd say spiritual seeker is pretty accurate. Very early on as a child, saw things differently than others, experienced things differently than others, and never stopped asking questions. I think that's what makes me such a good coach today, is I just come up with questions, infinite questions that lead to more curiosity and more learning. And as a child, I just didn't take things at face value, as most children don't. And I always wanted to know why, and I wanted to know what, and that didn't stop into my adolescence. And I just stumbled upon mentor after mentor who was there to meet me at that step in my journey to reroute my direction professionally, academically, and in terms of what I believe to be true about what is out there in this vast universe, who God really is, and what my role here is. So I'd say I've never not been that. It's just that it wasn't until adulthood that I realized that it wasn't what everyone was doing. And I've made it my life path to stay dedicated to my own growth and support other people with the tools that I've learned along the way, but never to step into a role of authority or superiority with the people that I meet along the way, because we all have so much to teach each other. And I'd say that if anybody feels like they have it all figured out, they're lying to themselves. So it's a never-ending journey, and I'm just excited to have a conversation with another person who seems to have a similar level of curiosity and dedication to personal growth that I do.
Well, yeah, I believe that is very important that we keep talking about it, and that we're also not afraid to be different than others, because there is a lot that is spread over the internet and people have access to everything. And it doesn't mean that everything is true. Although what is truth? Truth is it's like whatever is true for me can be totally wrong for you. So it's very interesting, but there's so much available online that I think it makes people also insecure about their own spirituality. Like, how do I feel things, and why is this coming up to me? And I know that because of the conversation that we had earlier, that was also true for you. Like, there was things that you felt that were not necessarily the same that what your family or the people that you grew up with was that what they were seeing. I would love you to talk a little bit more about that. So like how did you feel different than everybody else?
For one thing, I was seeing things that weren't there. But I think that, being around people that were much more contained and I'd say perhaps composed out in the world, I was much more expressive and joyful and affectionate, and maybe people would say hyperactive. And instead of meeting me where I was at, the decade I was raised in, it was just deemed inappropriate or labeled ADHD, or, told to really be more polite or more put together rather than speaking my mind. And I'd say that, as I did step into adolescence and adulthood, I realized there is an appropriate filter to have when you're out in society. But I think what I was aware of at the time was I was much more connected to my emotions. I was feeling things a lot more deeply than a lot of the people that I was around. And that was confusing as a kid, because I'd feel things that people weren't speaking to. There isn't a whole lot of direct communication, I'd say, in society. However, I do see with the big, huge wave of personal growth, people are getting much more clear about what are healthy boundaries, what does respectful communication look like, what does direct communication look like. So I think things are changing. But I think at the time, instead of discussing with me as a kid of, what are you feeling? what is it that you need? It was much more like, be quiet, or you're being too much, or it's not the time for that. And I think that's not how kids are being raised these days. So it's encouraging that there's a lot more consciousness around parenting and education. But the initial question you had, I think, was much more around trusting myself, was it? And
Yeah, and like really knowing, like you said, I saw things that were not there. Like,
yeah,
we know now that those things were probably there, but not in the
right.
realm where everybody could see it. So give us an example, like what did you see that nobody else could see?
I think I want to answer your first question first, which was around, that intuition, that nudge. We were talking earlier before you hit record around that I have a history of acting as a professional psychic. I've worked with tarot cards professionally. I was trained as a professional astrologer. And why did I let all that go? And I think that most kids, if not all, are tapped into other realms. That's what why they are so imaginative. And part of growing up in society is putting that behind us and focusing on what's more practical. I think for whatever reason, with my personality, my role here, I was not willing to shove that aside, although guilt and shame came with that. I wasn't willing to let it go, but I did feel like it was inappropriate because that's what information I was receiving around me. But it led me towards New Age spirituality. It led me towards divination, because when you're feeling something and somebody is denying that of you, it's one of the many, I'd say, things that cultivate codependency in a person, the needing to feel validated, the feeling invalidated and wanting something else to make you feel whole. And so I think for a lot of people that seek out divination or fortune telling, it's because they don't trust themselves. They haven't felt safe as a child and they want some sort of certainty. So that is part of what drew me to those things, because I was having all these intuitive nudges, but it wasn't being fostered as a gift or as true. For the things that I saw as a kid, memory, I've heard the statistic that 90% of our memories are inaccurate. So it's hard to really recount what I recall and say it was real. But I feel like I saw different paths in the woods show up that weren't there. Or I remember at recess running to show something to a classmate and the path wasn't there after I brought the person back. Or just seeing fleeting things out of our eyes. These can all be explained away by neuroscience and, the way our eyes play tricks on us. And I am the first person to say that science and spirituality, psychology, they all have, intersecting pathways, and we can discuss it and describe it from any one lens. I'd say that I was much more looking through a spiritual lens as a kid because I didn't know better. I didn't know science. I didn't know psychology. But looking back at it now, I don't know what I really saw. I just know that there was a lot going on, and there is so much more going on in the universe than a human brain could ever conceive of. And I was having a conversation with about this with somebody the other day, that some of us need to know and will continue to look for facts. And if we don't have data, we will dismiss it. Others of us know that we could never fully understand. So why don't we focus on what's working and be okay with the unknown? And I'd say I'm much more along that side of the lane.
Got it. And then it is so true that the mind will never be able to conceive what's outside of the mind. The mind is part of our programming, and it can only have what you put in it. And of course, there is a lot in it because we have previous lifetimes and we have experiences and we have our ancestors and there is the culture and everything's in it, but it is still limited to that. Everything that's out of that, we can never conceive. And so it is so valuable, even though I knew that there was way more out there than what meets the eye, still it is like only later in life that I value that, like seeing things that are not there. At this stage in my life, I know that I was just jumping through parallel universes. Everything is happening right now. The past, the future, we're in it. So we can tap into that. I understand that you say, well, if it was true, not true, it was still part of your experience as a child. And it is good, in my opinion, that you remember, because it will give other kids or teenagers that are maybe watching this, or mothers from kids and teenagers that are watching this, to understand that it is normal. What was your, like when you became like a young adult and you started with all your certifications. So you wanted to do all that stuff. What was guiding you? What did you want to accomplish? Where was it coming from?
I want to point on one thing that you just brought up for me, if you don't mind, before I answer that
Sure,
question.
you can say anything you want.
So, as a fellow mindset coach, I know you would agree with me that what we focus on grows. Would you agree?
Yes.
So, one of the things I like to support my clients to do is what do we want to grow? Because there is so much out there, right? Like some kids are seeing all these things, feeling all these things. And I think one of the things I wish I had support with was not looking at the things that aren't going to contribute to me, not engaging with darker energies, not getting wrapped up in stuff that isn't actually going to cultivate a better life. And so I think one of the things that gets messy with divination and witchcraft and stuff is people can get so wrapped up in stuff that really is better left untouched and focusing more on what gives us the best life we have available to us. So I just wanted to touch on that because that kind of flashed for me as I was thinking about what my childhood experience was. And I think as a sensitive person, we are more susceptible to things meddling with us. And I think that I wish I had been more protected from those things. Now that I know what I know, I want to support adults to also redirect away from the stuff that's really just a distraction. Even us challenging to get our recording going today, for example.
Yeah. And 100%, I agree with you. I believe that what you say is extremely valuable, that the guidance that you get when you, as a child, see and hear and know things that others don't see, hear, and know, that you get that positive support. And like, if you can, like your children, if they would be as sensitive as you are, you will be very capable of guiding them the right way. So when you don't know how to guide your child, I would just say seek professional people and let them help you guide your kids, because it is very easy to put your kids in the right direction. It's so easy if you just know. So professional help is the way to go, I think, when you never experienced it yourself. In this time and age, there's so many very sensitive kids that are born, so they can use all the help they can. So let's see, where were we? I think I wanted to understand what was driving you. Like, why did you go to, let's say, the new age world?
I was raised by very loving, open-minded parents who didn't want to impose any belief system on me. So I needed to go out and define God on my own because I wasn't getting anything forced down my throat. And because I was diagnosed with a health condition early on as a kid that manifested in different ways in college, I also was seeking to get alternative medical help because the allopathic system was not serving me. And in the midst of that, I was meeting with herbalists and farmers and nutritionists, and people along those lines are often more tapped into more fringe communities. And I'd say that tend to be more spiritual. Somebody who's dabbled in farming myself, I know that working on the land, living on the land does bring you back to a spiritual sense, whether or not you were tapped into it earlier or not, because we are creatures on this planet. So being in nature, I think, really fosters a feeling of that aliveness, that connectedness, that indoors we don't quite have access to. So I'd say health issues were the stimulus for me to reach out to people outside of my family, outside of my doctors. And college, I think, used to be a place for people to develop and learn and explore. And I happened to be in a place where I was meeting all sorts of new and interesting mentors that kind of whet my palate for seeking, that recognizing, oh, there are teachers out there are mentors out there. And then I'm a full believer in manifestation. And so because I was asking questions, I was being the question, I was being answered with answers of people with information and education for me to quench that thirst.
I want to read something, and that has to do with what we were just talking about, of a post that you wrote. Astrology and divinations were a way of life for me for so long. I found so much beauty, delight, and wonder drawing tarot cards, examining astrology charts, and making blessings with herbs and candles. These practices trained me to be a supernatural listener, to see beyond what my eyes can see, to hear what is unsaid. This phase prepared me for a lot, and I see how it armed me with so much more wisdom to share in the long run. I think it's one of the most beautiful things that I ever read. And then you go on, you say, I have always been open to learning more. And if you have been following my journey for some time, you may know that I am consistently and with intention cultivating a deeper faith and understanding on how things work in the vast universe. Again, like you worded so beautiful, because I think that a lot of people are on that journey. And so then you go on and you say, just in case it hasn't been made clear to you, I gave up all the witchy stuff this past summer. At first, it was a trial run to see how it felt not paying attention to astrology for 30 days. After only a couple of weeks, I was convinced life was better without it. There was a stark contrast between the way I had been experiencing manifestation from a new age spiritual mindset and my vastly improved relationship to God without all the ritual and focus on divination. This is so powerful and so beautiful. This shows how really you understand yourself, how you know you. I understand that you were looking for God, and now you realized that all the things that you did outside of you, that was not bringing you to God. And that's how I read it. And I can be wrong, but that's how it feels to me, that you realize like, this is not what God is. So now I'm very curious to know, what is God to you? And how would you define God in your life?
First of all, it was so powerful to hear that read back to me. So thank you for offering that. And, I've come to believe that God is a frequency, and I'm very careful not to define God publicly because I don't want to impose my beliefs on anybody else. It's so clear to me that people hear what they hear, they hear what they want to hear. And if people aren't ready to hear it, they'll hear what they think that they've heard you say, not what you really said. But calling God a frequency, I think, is the most accurate thing I can say. When I was wrapped up in New Age spirituality, I was calling on the universe, and it never felt real to me, but I tried talking to angels. I tried talking to guides. That always felt fake. It always felt forced, and I thought something was wrong with me because it didn't resonate. But what I did come to realize is that when we are speaking to unknown energies and beings, we are open to infinite energies and beings. Those that are there to support us and those that are there to mess with us. And so sticking to just the pure God frequency, we are already saying no to other things. And so that God frequency is pure love. It is pure light. And we can go on and on and on in debate about religion and did God create everything? And that I don't want to speak to that because I'm not an authority. I have my own ideas. They have ebbed and flowed. But what I do know is that when I communicate and work with God and put God first, life is very different. Often people question their own intuition, and I think that they should, because when God is speaking to you and when your trauma or your belief system or your patterns or your gut are speaking to you, they're two different things. And it's a practice that nobody can teach you. People can teach you how to start orienting yourself towards that practice, but you have to do it through trial and error. And that's what I offer to people, because when we do something to believe what others are telling us is true or go through a methodical sequence of steps that has worked for somebody else, we're automatically robbing ourselves of our authentic experience. And God can't be put into words. It is energy. And as far as I know, it's not a human being, and it's not, anything that we can draw. So I highly doubt that a human being could ever fully identify it, but I could be wrong. But I think frequency is probably the most conceivable word and most accurate word as far as human beings have discovered that can really describe how God works, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. It makes total sense to me. And again, I think you have a gift of explaining things that makes it so easy to understand. Because for sure, when I use the word God, all my paradigms are triggered, all my limited beliefs are triggered. And of course, I understand that God is that infinite power, that frequency, that much bigger than what we can ever even start to grasp or to imagine or anything. But if you put the word God, then I already see, then my mind makes like something out of it. So I prefer me never using the word God, because for me, and again, I am so grateful for how you say it. Like if we say something and people take it another way, on the other hand, people can only hear and see and experience their truth. So it doesn't really matter what we are saying. The way we are not responsible for how they take it. And if you are, let me say, on this spiritual path, which is again also a word, then when you cannot get fooled, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't, you can also not speak because of how other people are going to conceive that, because that's a journey that I went through for many years, because I thought I cannot say those things because maybe it's my truth, it's not their truth. But it doesn't matter, because their truth, there is only you in this world. Everything else is just like an expression of you. So there is nothing to worry about in a way. So we know now what God means to you, like what you say for yourself, what God means. So how would you say you can help other people that are what we would call spiritual seekers, that don't fit in anything, but they still are on that path? Like what would you say to them?
I feel like I kind of attract three different types of people. People who have never been into spirituality and they're interested in it. People who've been harmed by religion and there's some wounding around it and they want to reclaim it in a way that feels nurturing to them. Or people like myself who got really wrapped up in all this nonsense and new age packaged, monetized spiritual mumbo jumbo and want to find what actually is grounded for them. The thing about astrology and divination and herbs and spices and witchcraft is it's so much self-focused. I think those people who are the happiest know that when they're in service to others, when they're actually an active community member and they're doing good in the world, they feel really nurtured. And I think that people who are hurting or traumatized and want to feel better, the tendency is to think about the self and to fix it. And it becomes this endless pit of working on self and figuring out what's wrong and what's the next layer to heal. And I think that astrology and divination can tend to keep you so focused on labeling yourself, predicting your future, understanding every nook and cranny, instead of just simply being with the experience and not resisting everything so much. So I think that supporting people to get comfortable in their nervous system so they can be comfortable in the uncomfortability, they can be comfortable in joy, because even some people get unsettled if they're doing too well and then self-sabotage to find a baseline that they're used to of chaos. So getting people into their nervous systems, relaxed, functional, understanding who they really are, what is healthy communication, what are healthy boundaries, what does a functional adult actually look like, and then having a relationship to God where we can believe in magic again, we can believe in the nuances that actually are making up our reality. Everybody believes in something. They either believe in faith, they believe in doubt. Everything is a belief system. So choosing what belief system actually aligns to the life you want and supporting people to slow down enough to observe themselves and their own patterns, and then practice what do different tools and techniques and ways of being actually feel like, and collect data so that you can convince yourself of what's true and not trust somebody else to do that. I feel like after working with me for 3 months, I've given people enough tools to be self-sufficient. And what I've seen in the therapy industry and the coaching industry is this never-ending seeking. And, I don't like to speak to religion as much because I'm not as versed in it, but it almost seems similar in a way where you got to keep going back to somebody else for the answer, keep going back to somebody else to make you feel safe. And there's nothing wrong with community and there's nothing wrong with mentorship, but the brokenness that drives the seeking and the need is something that needs to be addressed. So I just like to remind people their power, remind people who they are, remind people that it's okay to be who they are, and there isn't this constant need to fix or micromanage everything. So really it's teaching relaxation and teaching people faith. And that's not something that can be done by logical concepts. It really is like a baby step of redirecting people moment by moment. And then with practice, it becomes autopilot.
Again, very clear to me. If people have questions, they just have to put them down in the comments. If you have questions for Becca, by the way, I put them in the comments, and I know she's going to keep an eye on that and she will answer. So who are the people that work with you? Can you just give us an idea?
The people that are ready to work with me are the people who've done everything else. They've read the personal growth books, they've been to therapy, they've been to coaching, and they know themselves well. They know what healthy boundaries are. They understand their patterns, but they haven't quite solved it all. Not that it's a problem to be solved, but they haven't quite gotten to the place of peace and confidence and faith that they're really seeking. And sometimes it's just permission that they need and then a safe space to practice it. But I've seen that there's a lot of focus on healing, healing, healing. And what I like to do is offer people a threshold to go from healed to thriving and give them the permission to step over that and let that old narrative go, let that old history of who they are dissipate, not ignore it, but be that functional, healed adult that they are today. So those types of people tend to be type A or ambitious or curious, the people who don't give up, the people who really know that they're capable of more and maybe just haven't seen it yet, but there's still this flame inside flickering that they believe it's possible. If people want to be fixed or coddled or just told that I understand their pain and that it makes sense, I'm not that coach. But if people feel like I am ready to work on myself and I believe in me, I might not feel like I believe in me, but I want to believe in me, those are the people that I can support. And I know because I've been that person. I was trying to calculate the other day how many being willing to invest in yourself is what pays dividends. And so many of us put our spiritual growth as the last thing to tackle. We want to work on our health or our money, our finances, our education, when working on the spiritual actually changes all of it. If you feel in your gut just anything about any inspiration or any feeling like this makes sense or feeling like I want it to be my time, that's your body telling you that it is time to focus on that. And if it's not, nothing's wrong with you either. I mean, I've stumbled and fallen a million times, and for whatever reason, people have their timelines and they have their journeys. And so if it doesn't feel like a yes now, it doesn't mean it's not a yes in the future, but just to give yourself some grace and some allowance for where you are in this moment. Sometimes life just is hard, and it's okay to say that. Looking out to the internet and everyone's happy, braggy posts, the internet's not real. It's not real life. And life will be full of ups and downs. And what I like to say to people around manifestation is it's not about getting a final result. It's a lifestyle shift. It's a paradigm shift. And it's about being more resilient with how life comes at us, because it's not about just chasing happiness and bliss all day long, because that's not real life.
I think you nailed it again. And so one of the reasons why I am bringing on people like Becca, and now I'm talking to my audience, is because she dares poking the whole new age world. And that's exactly what I do. And that doesn't mean that I'm not a product of it and I wasn't in there and I was a seeker. But I always felt like I was not I didn't fit into religion, but I also didn't fit into the whole new age world. And I also don't fit into the whole esoteric world. But I think I embrace a healthy criticism on everything, knowing that it is all a story and it is all part, all the stories that I wrote so many years, they're part of me. And so they make me where I am today. And then I think we are all coming to that next phase, that we don't need that being into belonging to something. Like you said in the beginning, that we have to start trusting ourselves again, trusting ourselves and that higher consciousness that is driving us, and learning how to do that. And then we come back to my pet peeve, where I say that we first have to know how the universe works. We have to know the laws of the universe, the rules of the mind. You spoke about the nervous system. Once you know how everything works, then knowledge becomes power, because then you can start the real journey and you can make up your own mind what it is that you offer people. How can people work with you?
I work with people one-on-one on Zoom, and I also have a 10-week group program for people who really want to rebuild their faith or deepen their faith in a way that feels authentic to them. I always keep it as a small group. So there's lots of one-on-one attention, but there's also community aspect to it. And those that go through the curriculum have access to a private Facebook group for life, so that as people are coming to this understanding within themselves, they have community with other people who also are on that same path, because it can feel isolating. So either way, if people want to get a hold of me and talk about which option feels best to them, I offer discovery calls through my website, and that's just a phone call. I don't even need to see your face. So we'll just chit chat about what it is that you're looking for and see if my skill set can serve you. And if you're not really ready to invest in coaching, I've got a workbook on Amazon, Manifestation Demystified. And that goes over the most common silly myths that the internet promotes as real for people who get so wrapped up and confused by manifestation. So I do my best from my own personal experience over the last couple decades to unravel what's really going on behind those statements and how you can really work with it on your own and see, the proof is in the pudding, see how it works for you.
Correct. So I will definitely put all those links below the video so that people can find you. What would be the last thing that you would like to say to people watching this video? Is there a message that you have for them?
Yeah, just that finding safety within yourself first is so important, because when we know that we can trust ourselves, the outside world isn't so threatening, and we can discern it with so much more clarity and direction. And so instead of finding the perfect guru or the perfect religion, finding a close to perfect relationship to yourself, I think, is the place to really focus on first and foremost, so that no matter what goes wrong around you, you have you to rely on, and you and God, I think, is the most foundational and nurturing and valuable relationship that you can really cultivate. So if that's something that you're new to or wanting to improve on, focusing on that first is going to improve all areas of your life.
Beautiful. Okay. All right, you guys. I just am going to wrap it up for this conversation. I am very thankful, Becca, that you wanted to come on. And I really appreciate your enthusiasm. You're so really inspirational. And so again, if people have questions for you, they can find you on your website probably, or on the links that we put below, but they can also put their comments here. And I would encourage people to ask their questions here in the comment section, because then the answers will be also valuable for other people. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching us, and we'll see each other soon. Thank you for joining us. If our journey today resonated with you, please consider subscribing and liking this video to support our growing community. For more insights and resources, be sure to check the links in the description below. They're filled with valuable information and support to guide you on your spiritual path. Remember, your soul's journey is unique and magnificent. Stay connected, keep exploring, and let's continue this journey together in our next episode. Until then, keep listening to the whispers of your soul and embrace the life of your dreams.